Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here.
And most important thing is Joanna.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Joanna, are you there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here.
Thank you. Okay. So, first of all, we sent our warmest greetings, love and energy from Turkey, from Turkey to our esteemed speakers, valued participants in Brazil in COP30. I am delighted and proud to present you with an important session today, featuring many distinguished figures in our energy and in our world. I will introduce each of them individually. We have guests from China, Singapore, and Sweden. Yes, COP30 Turkey events are ongoing. We continue to contribute our ideas and experiences to the COP ecosystem of thought with the goal of transforming and making our world a better place. Here is what we will be sharing and brainstorming on in today's panel. We will focus on the transformations taking place in the main axis of our world, which are changing their shell at an even faster pace in this period. And the increasing geopolitical and geoeconomic developments. We are now navigating a geopolitical landscape of energy. The headline of our panel is the emerging and conflicting powers of our planet and the rising opportunities for cooperation at COP30. So, new economic consequences in the transforming world equation in Asia. So now I would like to first want to introduce Professor Dr. Hei Sing So. Am I right, Professor?
Yes.
Am I pronouncing rightly?
Yes, correct.
He is an attorney at So and Associates. It is a law firm he founded that bears his name.
Yeah.
In addition to his legal practice, he serves as president of Uyguzi
Correct.
Stragen Learning, an organization dedicated to teaching traditional Chinese strategies. This chapter in Professor Tussauds' career is particularly important for us today.
Thank you.
And his expertise encompasses Chinese political leadership, diplomacy, and the application of ancient Chinese wisdom in contemporary context. Tussauds' research focuses on the influence of traditional Chinese strategies on modern Chinese diplomacy and military strategy, which is very, very important today. He examines and evaluates the role of these strategies in China's One Belt, One Road initiative and strategic approaches towards Taiwan and the United States. His analysis often examine the intersection of ancient Chinese philosophies with current geopolitical developments. So I have another news about him. He's also the author of I Ching and the 36 Traits, a book frequently cited by scholars from various disciplines. Please tell us about this valuable book of yours as it relates to our topics. Once you have concluded our presentation. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, you're with us. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The invitation for me to give a short presentation about the Chinese strategic thought and energy, which I think may be very related, okay, to the theme of today's conference, okay? Now,
Yes.
Okay, now let me show the PowerPoint. I think the PowerPoint is, let me see, yes, this is okay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Definitely, yeah. I can see it.
Okay. Now I think China, if in modern China or in contemporary China, we have three strategic periods, okay, under different leaders of China. Mao Zedong is the first, I think, who is a revolutionary, okay. Deng Xiaoping is the second one, which is focused on reform, and Xi Jinping, the present leader, is focused on global reach, okay. Different focus on the strategic aims, okay, of China's grand strategy. I think One Belt One Road initiative, or also known as BRI, is a version 2 of Deng Xiaoping reform strategy. Because under the Deng Xiaoping reforms, the economy of China, okay, increased, okay, very, very quickly. But in the recent year, the economy in the domestic market has become saturated. So Xi Jinping have thought about this and think that the economy of China, or the economic strategy of China, must go beyond the internal market, okay, beyond the borders, okay, outside, move more outside hours, okay, beyond the China market. That's the point. Why they adopt a One Belt One Road initiative, which is in essence a westward strategy. We can look the geography carefully. The One Belt One Road BRI initiative is a Western strategy towards Eurasia. Okay, we can see that on the north there some resistance from Russia. In the eastern side, resistance from Japan or Korea. In the southwest, from India. In southeast, from United States, Australia, or even Vietnam. So after assessment, I think the Chinese leadership think that a westward strategy, expansion into Eurasia, is a more appropriate and optimum and likely successful strategy for the contemporary China in the context of economic expansion. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the new Silk Road or BRI, okay, is different from the past. Okay, it's not only a trade route for goods. I think in my study, BRI is the example of Chinese stratagem, okay, known as to capture, to destroy a power situation. There is a Chinese classical concept known as Xi. Xi means a power situation. The main gist of this stratagem is to use different means to create one's own power situation, to beat the power situation of his enemy. In this sense, I mean the United States. BRI, and the BRICS, okay, are parts of this whole stratagem. It aims to create an invisible cage, okay, to cover your enemy, and then use this cage to restrain the enemy like the pulling the strings of a puppet. This is the essence of a classic stratagem of capture and destroy. Okay, so BRI in fact is a new sea power situation. But how to exercise or implement strategy in terms of energy? It means it must build up an alternative or renewable or green energy, contrast to the petroleum energy, okay, the traditional energy supply, which is controlled or mainly advocated by the United States. Okay, so how using this or applying this BRI strategy in terms of in the context energy, I think it can boost 4 strategic advantages for China. For example, the first one is if more nations in the world in the BRI changed to renewable energy or green energy, they will become less reliant on the petroleum supply as manipulated or controlled by the United States. Okay, this is the first strategic advantage for China. The second one is that the BRI focuses on connection and transport, so that a sufficient energy supply for this transport and connection is very essential. If China can facilitate more smooth energy, full support energy flow by green means, then it will become less costly. It will accelerate the prosperity of the nations across the BRI. This is the second advantage. Third, if China wants to export the infrastructure services to other countries, if the China can put more funds on the R&D on green course and such as solar energy, wind energy, water energy infrastructure, it can boost Chinese overall technology export and even the human resources, technical transfer, etc., etc. This is the third advantage for the China to adopt a BRI. Fourth, certainly in the long run, if this can reduce the impact of climate change through this flourishing of green energy through the BRI, China geopolitically can build up its reputation among the nations as a leader for the harmony of the whole planet. This will totally in contrast to Trump's call return to petroleum and plastics. So this is an additional geopolitical advantage for China. But when we talk about opportunity advantage, we must also talk about the challenges. I think there are 4 challenges. The first challenge is the rising of multipolarity. In the emerging multipolarity world, many nations, mostly nations, will strike a balance between East and West. They will not totally lean on each side to choose a bloc or a commitment to alliance. The United States still have influence in world affairs, but certainly it depends on what issues and advantage this country can get from the United States. So there is still a competition between China and United States to pull the geopolitical alliance from different nations in the multipolar world. The second one is about BRI. BRI is a long-term strategy. There now the Ukraine conflict still on the way. But sooner or later, the conflict may end sooner or later. As after if the settlement can be agreed in the coming future, the United States and some other European countries, as they have used much fund on this war, to defend Ukraine, they will certainly want to get some compensation or rewards, from the reconstruction of Ukraine. As Ukraine is also a very important country along the BRI route, I think American participation in the reconstruction of Ukraine may also affect Chinese BRI economic strategy throughout this Eurasian region. So China will also face challenge economically and geopolitically from the United States and other European countries. Also, the third one is about Russia, Because Russia is different from China, Russia, although is an important partner for China, but there any difference shall not be totally disregarded. In the long run, the situation may be different from the present day, as Russians highly rely on export of oil and gas, traditional petroleum energy sources or minerals such as etc. So, in comparatively speaking, Moscow will be less keen in green energy as China does. So there is an issue that not also to be addressed. Beijing may compromise with Russia in some aspect, as Russia also want to recover its economy after the Ukraine conflict by increasing their energy, petroleum or gas exports. So there may be some quarrel or disagreement between Moscow and Beijing. And lastly, we don't only look into Russia or the United States. We could also need to also consider other regional powers such as Turkey and Iran. Okay, because Turkey and Iran are also a rising power in the geopolitical games in the coming future. Their interests may not totally align with China, Russia, or even the United States. For example, Iran may be more interested in nuclear power and petroleum sale. Okay, Turkey, on the other hand, is a keen pioneer in green energy. However, sometimes politics and economics are mixed. When dealing with China, Russia, and the United States, Turkey and Iran may also need to mix up their own individual overall assessment. This will make the progress of green energy or renewable energy more complicated, okay, in the long run. In particular, even nations interested in green energy, for example, they may want to find a different supplier of such technology to prevent risk of dependency. So therefore, there is a challenge which may be faced. But lastly, I want to tell you about, according to Chinese wisdom of yin and yang, everything is made of yin and yang. Two polar forces exist in a dialectic way. Yin can change to yang and yang can change to yin. Challenge can become opportunity and vice versa. The best we can do is to grab the timing and take the right action. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, great. And maybe how, Professor, how would you assess Chinese dominance in energy, in global energy mix? So will it be able to fulfill its commitments by 2050? And what will the global economic system be like? I suppose those who don't speak Chinese, maybe we will not possible to find a job anywhere in the world. So after Belt and Road projects, so how would evaluate the situation?
Yeah. I see. Because the Chinese the population is very large. Okay, very large, and also there are different industries in China. So that I think the China, in fact, I think the main they have an intention or plan to go to more into renewable and green energy. But I think it takes time. Okay, it takes time and may last for a transitional period. So that you can see China is still seeking the sufficient and affordable price of supply of petroleum from different countries, even including Iran. Okay, so I think in the short term, okay, it has some difficulties to meet the requirement of the carbon reduction. Okay, but I think it will try to diversify. Okay, and have a general direction towards to finding more green energy. In fact, for China, if totally relying on carbon energy is not a benefit. Okay, great benefit to him, to the whole nation. Okay, diversify and then generally change to more renewable and green energy, I think is a optimum appropriate goal for Chinese government and leadership.
Yes, and also I would like to turn to your book. I would like to give some time at the end, maybe speaking. I think speaking your language is also difficult. It won't be possible to keep up with the competition in the world.
Yeah. So my academic goal, you see, I try to promote, okay, such wisdom, okay, because such wisdom usually will be written in Chinese, okay, Chinese sources, okay. So all foreigners,
Definitely, yeah.
So that my academic goal is to translate it more easily, so that other people, because I think this is treasure for the whole mankind, not only for China, okay. Other nations, including all nations, can adopt this structure, okay, for their own benefit, okay, even to protect or to safeguard their national interest. I think this whole mankind is not owned by China. It's the treasure and wisdom for the whole mankind to benefit the whole planet.
Now we listened the wisdom of the Eastern culture, Eastern economy, and now we will first focus the approach of Western culture and wisdom. So I would like to represent Francesco Sassi, is a postdoctoral research associate and assistant professor. Dear Francesco, are you there?
I'm here. Hi everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you. And yes, he is assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Oslo in Norway. He is valued, our guest from not Sweden, Norway. So he is valued friend and a key figure. His research focuses on energy geopolitics, international relations, and energy as a tool of statecraft. In an environment where energy dependence and geopolitics have become a key variable in determining national and energy security strategies and transition policies, his research examines the connections between international politics and energy, blending international relations theory with a solid background in energy studies. Since 2017, Dr. Sassi has been collaborating regularly with the Observatory for International Politics of the Italian Parliament and the Energy Security Unit at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. He is the author of numerous referred articles and book chapters. He has significant consulting experience with public and private institutions on energy geopolitics, energy markets, and energy diplomacy. We are delighted to have him at our session. I would like to point out that before joining the University of Oslo, Dr. Sassi worked as a researcher in energy geopolitics and markets in Bologna and as a researcher at the University of Pisa. He holds a PhD in political science, geopolitics with honors for a research project on China-Russia natural gas dependence. Dr. Sassi opinions and analyses are also featured in the BBC, Al País, CNN, Standard & Poor's, Le Monde, The Times, the Diplomat, Energy Intelligence, Petroleum Economist, and many other think tanks and media outlets. We enjoy following them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. So we'll share with you a very brief presentation just to have some thoughts about what we are discussing today and some other ideas that I've been willing to share with you. Do you see my presentation? I hope so.
Yeah. No.
No.
But now I can see it.
Okay. Let me know if this works in your hand.
Yeah, I can see it at the moment.
Okay. Okay, great.
No problem.
So, is it working?
At the moment, I can't see.
Okay.
But just 1 minute ago, now disappeared. Would you try to do it?
Yeah, I will just stop and reconnect. Let's see if this works.
Yes, that would be great.
I can see that. No, I think it's not working. Oh, yeah. Now it works.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, thanks to you, and sorry for the delay. I hope this time it works.
No problem.
Okay, so so thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me talking about these very important issues and how energy and geopolitics turns out to be one of the crucial issue for the future of the energy transition, of the energy security in Asia, but also the international order and how different countries interrelate and have the possibility to talk, to speak, to have diplomacy, but also to have competition and eventually collaborations regarding energy topics. Energy is key, obviously, for what we are discussing today at COP30, the future of the global energy systems, and how the world can actually transform and advance towards an energy transition and net zero energy target by 2050. Understanding how geopolitics turn out to be an energy issue, but also how energy is understood as a geopolitical asset, as a geopolitical instrument in the hands of the government and great powers right now, is absolutely crucial to understand the future evolution of the energy systems. The world is interconnected. We are talking today about Asia. This panel talks about Asia, but actually energy geopolitics is changing all around the world. Much happened around 2021 and 2022 when the war in Ukraine started, and Europe and Russia, two very major great powers in terms of not just economic power, but also energy and geopolitics, started to quarrel through energy assets, energy exports. In this slide, you see the network of natural gas pipelines from Russia to Europe.
interrupted. Sorry, Francesco, but
Okay.
again, it is disappearing. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. I would just talk. It will.
Just talk
Yeah, yeah.
without
It would be.
explaining.
It
No
will. It
problem.
will be.
We will publish it. Okay.
Okay. No
Later.
problem. It will be more boring for the people attending the panel. And sorry for that. I don't know why it's not working.
Doesn't
Everything.
matter.
Everything.
We will
As I
publish
sta-
it.
as I was stating, everything started in 2021 and 2022 when we understood that energy interdependency really matters for the future of energy systems, of global energy systems, but also the path forward for the energy transition. Natural gas, oil, trade and exports from Russia to Europe became a tool for exerting leverage, geopolitical leverage, and not just related to the energy market and the energy industries. But the way we fought for over 30 years, 40 years about energy interdependencies in the world has been shaped in the literature from a scientific perspective, at least, on the interdependency between Russia and Europe. Since the war in Ukraine started and Russia invaded the country, this has been changing, and energy interdependencies all around the world as a consequences of the changing interdependencies between Europe and Russia are actually right now changing the equation, not just in the European continent, but all around the world. We are talking about Asia. We are talking about major countries, major great powers in Asia absorbing the consequences of this crisis. We had peak prices for natural gas, for oil in 2022 and then again in 2023. Prices right now are relaxing, but energy markets are quite disturbed for the consequences of this energy crisis stemming from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then we had other crises, other incidents happening in the Middle East with several wars involving Israel and other energy consumer and producing countries in the Middle East. The most important one is absolutely Iran. And so we are seeing more and more the world disrupted by conflicts, but at the same time, we are living in a world where energy is understood as a geopolitical asset in the hands of governments and in the hands of countries fighting each other. Today, just yesterday, we witnessed the another wave of drone and missile attacks against Ukrainian energy infrastructures by Russia, and Ukraine is exerting much pressure on Russian energy assets, especially the oil ones, targeting and striking Russian terminals, refineries, production facilities. And we are seeing and absorbing this instability on the global level each and every day. In Asia, we are looking at two major countries very relevant for the current and future of the energy security and energy transition, absorbing the consequences of these crises and the geopolitization of energy trade and production. These are China and India, who was before me speaking has plenty explained how China has a new plan, has a new blueprint to secure energy transition and energy security together. But the uncertainties right now in the war, because of the consequences of the war of Russia in Ukraine, but also the consequences of the instability in the Middle East, in Africa, and Latin America, where many energy producers are actually involved in geopolitical tensions. Just let's think about also Venezuela and what is happening outside the offshore and maritime zones just outside Venezuela. We are seeing the world of energy markets and the world of geopolitics becoming and merging together. China has been absorbing these uncertainties with a very peculiar energy transition and security strategy. But right now, as I was telling before, uncertainties are more than certainties. And we have just seen the International Energy Agency publishing this new World Energy Outlook just a few days ago, where the uncertainties from a fragile international environment has been translating into the future projection, future forecast, and future scenarios about energy consumption. We are back with a scenario designed by the International Energy Agency with the world consuming more oil than right now, more natural gas than right now, and coal as an energy resource phasing out much more slowly than previously thought because of the consequences of what we are seeing, and especially the prioritization of energy security and the security of supplies compared to other principles, values shaping the identity of energy policy making, at least in the last couple of decades, and especially after the Paris Agreement in 2015. The energy transition and environmental stewardship are somehow on the side in this geopolitical scenario. All countries are trying to relate more and more the energy transition and rephase it, reconceptualize it as an energy security strategy, and not anymore just a transition strategy to phase out hydrocarbon consumption, but also the economic equity and market-oriented policy making that has been governing the world of energy markets has been changing as a consequence of these instability, of these tensions and geopolitical tensions. This makes energy security a top priority for governments, for policymakers, and energy security is right now among the three most discussed issues in any democratic elections also in the West. And this obviously changes the equation from what we have been seeing over the last 15 years and what we have been talking about over the last 15 years in terms of energy transition and the possibility to reach net zero by 2050. This makes Asia at the same time very important because the energy security of these Asian countries, mostly China and India, and I'm very sorry that I could not show you my slides because of the changing future energy demand scenarios by the International Energy Agency are really helping here to understand how uncertainties and geopolitical uncertainties are changing the future projection of energy consumption in Asia. And will be a balance, it will be a matter of balance between energy security and how policymakers in these countries will understand the dependency on international energy markets that will shape the energy transition. And I'm sorry to say, but it will be not anymore the other way around. The world is more insecure and the fragile environment will raise up the need for the security of energy supplies because of matters of economic and national security. Energy is not anymore just a matter of transition and green policies. It's not a matter of free markets and economic efficiency anymore, but it's a tool of geopolitical pressure. And the future of the energy transition will be also decided in Asia, and where these countries in Asia will be capable of attaching a solid and functioning energy transition strategy towards energy security strategies, which will be the most important issue for many countries going forward, and because of the consequences of the fragile international environment that we are seeing today. Thanks.
Thank you, Francesco. as an expert who has studied China, how would you view China's dominance in energy? Are we now in a green geopolitics? And what kind of new balances will emerge? I mean, the BRICS are well known. What kind of world will we face as the West and East move closer or further apart? How will the United States maintain its superiority? Will it be able to maintain it? So this is another phase, and we are at the core. So, but what will be done without Russia, China, or India? How will these goals and commitments be met? Brazil is also a BRIC member. So, how will the problems be solved? What is your expectation? Which countries in Asia do you see as successful in energy transition?
A lot of questions, a lot of very interesting questions, and the answers could take weeks, I think. But thanks.
I know.
I think that we have been thinking about the energy transition as a collective issue regarding mostly cooperation between countries and the use of free markets in order to spur and bolster and increase the interdependency also from a technological perspective regarding the energy transition. And the fact that most of the manufacturing of green technologies are right now located in just one country, that is China. And actually that country is also a great power and obviously the first and foremost challenger of the primacy of the United States in the international system. This makes the primacy of China in green technology and low carbon technology an issue of geopolitical concern for the United States. And this also makes the competition within these technological landscape a part of the same uncertainty scenario and fragile scenario that we are seeing in international environment right now. The world cannot expect the level of cooperation that we have been seeing until 2020, or at least until 2019, and then we have the COVID-19 pandemic. The world has changed. The priorities of great powers have been changing after the COVID pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but also a global energy crisis that has started in 2021, that has been worsened by several conflicts thereafter, but is also worsened by the behavior of certain countries having a very heavy economic, nationalist economic and mercantilist agenda in international economy. And we have been seeing also the United States changing the behavior through the second Trump administration. This change in behavior of the United States is certainly also shifting the perception in Asia, but also in other developing economies, about how their interdependencies with the energy interdependencies with the United States could be leveraged in order to gain, in order to have gains in other issue areas like trade, bilateral trade, economic trade, security, military spending. We have been seeing that in Europe. So again, summarizing what I wanted to say, the world has been changing. China has a great leverage right now on green technologies, but the ability for China to pursue its strategic objectives will be based and influenced by the perception of China abroad. And what does mean the interdependency from a technological, economic, and energy perspective with Chinese technologies and low carbon technologies for the future of the energy transition in many other countries, in many other continents. You just think about the influence and the number, the vast volumes of solar panels exported by Chinese companies in Africa or in Pakistan. The way these countries will see the interdependencies with these Chinese subjects will be absolutely fundamental for the future of the energy transition and the ability of the world to reach net zero by 2050. The other possibility is that geopolitics will be the driving issue to drive the future of energy interdependencies, which will make the things very harder, not just for China, but for the whole world.
Thank you for all these quite valuable assessments. Now we are maybe later, if we have time, we can come to another aspects of the world discussions. Now we are going to Singapore. We have a wonderful guest. She is young and knowledgeable about the energy transition. Her country is one of the most important in Asia, and its economic success is frequently discussed. We will hear from a leading expert in his field about what's happening there in the energy transition. I will introduce her now. Joanna Tan. Joanna Tan works at the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Singapore. She is physically with you and, of course, with us. We are very fortunate to have her with us. This young colleague who has worked on policies supporting Singapore's energy transition and industrial decarbonization, has extensive experience in her ministry. His work supports the country's efforts to increase energy security, competitiveness, and sustainability as it moves toward its net zero emissions target by 2050. What more could you ask for? Excellent. We will be delighted to hear from her about Singapore's energy transition efforts, and of course, we will be informed. This is as extraordinary. We understand how sharing knowledge and experience along with a multidisciplinary approach accelerates these transformation efforts and their importance. We thank you. Yes, Joanna. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's a privilege to join you all here at COP30, and I'm here to share Singapore's story, the journey of a small island nation, just 700 square kilometers in size, with no natural resources, yet we are one that has made a national commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So for us, the energy transition is both an existential crisis as well as a strategic opportunity. It's about securing reliable, affordable energy today while building a cleaner and more resilient system for tomorrow. So let me take you through what we have done so far and how we will be very happy to work with all our partners through COP. So let me start with where we are. Singapore imports almost all our energy. About 99% of our electricity comes from natural gas, and we have limited renewable potential. No hydro, wind corridors, and little land for large-scale solar farms. At the same time, we are one of the most urbanized and trade-intensive economies in Asia. Energy powers not only our households and transport, but also our electronics, chemicals, and data center industries. That means our energy strategy must constantly balance between three imperatives. So that's what you see here. Energy security, keeping the lights on in a volatile world, energy sustainability, reducing our carbon footprint, and energy affordability, ensuring that the cost of electricity remains affordable for everyone. We call this the energy trilemma, and navigating it lies at the heart of Singapore's energy transition. So despite these constraints, Singapore has set clear long-term goals. We have pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and to peak our national emissions around 2030. These commitments are enshrined in our nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. To get there, we are not just cutting emissions, we are re-engineering our entire energy system. Our approach is anchored on innovation, market-based policies, and close collaboration between government, industry, and research institutions. In other words, Singapore sees decarbonization not as a cost to bear, but as the next engine of sustainable growth. Our transition strategy rests on what we call the 4 switches. 4 key levers that will transform how Singapore produces and uses energy. First, natural gas. Second, solar. It's also our most promising domestic renewable source. Third, we are developing low carbon alternatives. Here we are investing in next generation fuels such as low carbon hydrogen and ammonia, as well as carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies. This will be crucial to decarbonize sectors where emissions are hardest to abate. Lastly, we are working with our regional partners to import low carbon electricity and develop regional power grids. Because our domestic renewable potential is limited, we are looking beyond our borders to import up to 6 gigawatts of low carbon electricity by 2035 through interconnections with our ASEAN neighbors. Together, these 4 switches, natural gas, solar, low carbon alternatives, and low carbon electricity imports, provide the foundation for a cleaner, more resilient, and regionally connected energy future for Singapore. So let me go through each of them. First, natural gas. It's the cleanest form of fossil fuel. Today, around 95% of Singapore's electricity is still generated from natural gas. We have shifted to natural gas since the early 2000s. We expect this to still be needed to provide base load generation capacity for the next 1 to 2 decades before low carbon energy sources like hydrogen become commercially viable. We will continue to work closely with industry to improve the energy and efficiency of power plants, bring in best-in-class and hydrogen-ready plants, and ensure security and reliability of gas supplies. However, we will not meet our climate targets if additional demand is served by natural gas-fired power plants alone. We need to shift to low-carbon alternatives. And this is where our next few switches apply. Solar is our second key switch. And it's also the most viable source of renewable energy source in Singapore right now. We are creatively deploying solar in land-scarce Singapore. So for example, as you will see there, putting solar panels on reservoirs and on buildings, and also scaling up our energy storage systems to manage solar intermittency. By 2030, we aim to deploy at least 2 gigawatt peak of solar, enough to power roughly 350,000 households and at midday. However, with our limited land space, there is a limit to how much solar energy we can deploy. Last but not least, we have our regional power grids as our last key switch. So low carbon electricity imports will likely be the most technically and commercially viable decarbonization pathway until at least 2035 for us. So in September 2024, we announced the increase in our imports target from 4 gigawatts to around 6 gigawatts, which will meet around 1/3 of our energy needs by 2035. In June 2022, we embarked on our first electricity imports project, the Lao PDR Thailand Malaysia Singapore Power Integration Project. In September 2024, we expanded the capacity for LTMS, phase 2 of the project, to 200 megawatts, whereby both Malaysia and Laos can provide supply to the project. To date, we have granted conditional licenses for our most advanced imports projects from Indonesia, totaling 2 gigawatts, as well as 6.35 gigawatts of conditional approvals from Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia, and Malaysia, all of which are key partners in the region. These levels of approval reflect the progress of these projects, and Singapore will continue to grant approvals and progress projects as long as they remain credible, competitive, and can secure requisite approvals from the relevant jurisdictions. Our bilateral and plurilateral electricity imports projects will serve as a stepping stone to realize the ASEAN Power Grid vision. This concept is not new and was first discussed more than 30 years ago, but is gaining steam lately due to the climate change imperative. Cross-border electricity trading is a win-win solution. The enhanced connectivity will drive investments in renewable energy projects, stimulating regional GDP growth by 1 to 3%. Source countries will also have the opportunities to expand their markets beyond domestic buyers, increasing sales revenue, and transition countries will benefit from the wheeling charges. So this is where we are working very closely with all our partners in the region, and we are very appreciative to them as well for coming on board to work with us on this. Fourth, we are also developing low carbon alternatives. So to offer us more options, these are all the other options that we are exploring. In October 2022, Singapore unveiled our national hydrogen strategy to develop hydrogen as a major decarbonization pathway for hard-to-abate sectors such as power generation, marine, and industrial sectors. Hydrogen has the potential to supply up to 50% of our power needs by 2050, but major hurdles need to be overcome. We are also building our capacity in other low-carbon alternatives such as geothermal, carbon capture and storage, and nuclear energy. By transforming the energy mix alone isn't enough. The entire power system must become smarter, cleaner, and more flexible. So Singapore is investing heavily in grid modernization and digital energy management. We have deployed large-scale energy storage systems, one of the largest in Southeast Asia, to stabilize our grid and manage solar intermittency. We are enabling demand-side participation, where businesses and households can adjust consumption in response to real-time price signals, helping to balance supply and demand. And we are piloting smart energy districts, where AI, sensors, and data analytics optimize how buildings and industries consume power. These investments will ensure that our future energy system is not only low carbon, but also resilient and responsive. Of course, we are transitioning in a world of uncertainty, and the shocks of the past few years have shown how fragile global energy systems can be. Prices spiked, supply chains fractured, and even advanced economies face shortages. So for Singapore, these events underscore the importance of diversification and resilience. Today, we maintain multiple LNG supply sources, flexible import terminals, and a growing share of renewable imports, so that no single disruption can paralyze our grid. In short, our strategy is to build an energy system that can withstand volatility while staying on the path to net zero. Resilience and sustainability must advance together, not in competition, but in partnership. And that is what we truly believe in. So with that, let me close off with this thought. Singapore's energy transition is at its core a story of innovation born from limitation. So we may be small, but our ambitions are not. We aim to be a living testbed where new ideas for decarbonization, finance, and technology can be proven and then scaled up across the region. We also recognize that no country can succeed alone, and the pathways to net zero are interdependent through shared energy grids, shared markets, and shared innovation, which is why at COP30, Singapore stands ready to collaborate, innovate, and accelerate the global transition with all our partner countries in the region. Together, we can power a future that is not only low carbon, but also secure, inclusive, and full of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. It was a great presentation. And of course, I have a question. Actually, what kind of experiences can the world gain from Singapore's energy transition? What challenges do you face? What are the potential areas for cooperation, maybe with Turkey, with our country? Maybe a key framework that would be nice to hear from you. And also, my second dimension that I would like to share, how would you assess China's energy dominance in the world and in Asia? And also, I have to tell all of us that we must conclude our panel at 11:15 Brazilian time. So we will also share this valuable presentation. Yes, Joanna, we are hearing you.
So I think on Singapore's end, what I would say our experiences are that I'm hoping other countries can take away as well as learn from our experience is really how we are navigating through the energy transition, and we remain committed even despite all the limitations that we are facing. So as you have seen through my presentation, in Singapore we really do not have much options, but despite that, we believe that climate change is something that we need to address and we need to solve. It's something that can't wait for much longer, and we remain committed to achieving our targets by the timelines that we have set for ourselves. So with that in mind, we are working very closely with all our partners within the region. So that includes in Southeast Asia, so all our Southeast Asian partners. But we also believe that there is more that we can learn from other partners in the rest of the world who have advancements in their technologies. So R&D opportunities where we can exchange and test innovations and technologies amongst ourselves. Companies between us that can come over to Singapore and also share their technologies with our companies so that our industries can decarbonize. So I believe that those are ways where we can work together with other countries in the region as well as globally. And we hope that that is something that we can both exchange our experiences on. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Now I would like to turn to Professor Hay. Professor, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Yes. Would you try to a little bit explain your book, actually? And maybe that would be in 3 minutes or something, or 4 minutes. Would you try to explain its context? Thank you. And importance.
Yeah. It's very simple. There is a wisdom in Chinese throughout the Chinese history known as 36 tricks, okay, or 36 stratagem. These books, okay, is about to explain the 36 stratagem to the lay reader, okay. But in fact, most of the people, if they ask you about 36 tricks, they only know about the few words, okay? Because it's very simple words, okay? Every trick is simple words. For example, there is a trick known as beauty trick. Beauty trick, what it means is used to beauty, okay? To serve your purpose, okay? I think in most history, many people, many politicians, statesmen, or nations use beauties, okay? As spies, okay? But this book is different because, in fact, most of the Chinese sports in ancient China were shaped or influenced by a very classic text known as Book of Changes, which is focused on the yin and yang theory. So that in this book, I will use the Book of Changes theories to explain more details about the underlying philosophy of each trick, so that the lay readers can understand more thoroughly about each trait, and I hope, okay, people after reading this book, very simple book, okay, can apply this trait not only in their daily life, maybe in business or even in politics. Very simple.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Actually, and now what I like to do, we have quite small time. Because of this reason, I would like to try to give also what I am doing actually. I would like to share a few details about myself. Actually, if I had time, I would like to have shared important information about Turkey's geographical position and achievements in energy geopolitics. I hope we can host a COP as well soon. Actually, now in energy sector, I am the founder of the National Energy Forum and energy economist, analyst, and journalist. With a 50-year vision, I have strived to be a pioneer in multidisciplinary dialogues in Turkey, sharing the need to redesign the energy sector with society, committed to objective and critical values, and committed to acting impartially. I'm a graduate of the Department of Economics. While studying economics, I contributed to my university economics education at the University of Exeter in England and Moscow State University in Russia. I also have a master's degree in energy technologies from Sabancı University, Faculty of Engineering and Natural Sciences. Immediately after university, I worked as a journalist and columnist in the National Economic Press, working with prominent figures in the press and economic world. Since 1992, I have written on energy and environmental issues. I have participated in various international meetings, presented papers, and strive to be a pioneer of a new generation journalism through my projects to guide the national and international public and private sectors during the transition to a free market. I developed the mission of Energy Information Administration in Turkey and initiated the establishment of the Energy Market Monitoring and Rating Agency in 2005. I persistently continue to develop national and international projects to establish the information infrastructure in the energy sector and build a sustainable future to strengthen the strategic position of the Turkish energy industry in the changing Turkish and global context. I have ensured the periodic production and flow of information and senior decision makers and the public with the contributions of the scientific community since 2001. And thank you very much indeed for this quite informative and stunning panel. And our guests were really quite important figures in their focus, in their world of academy. And thank you very much. And I would like to give lastly to everyone 2 minutes. Just give final remarks for all of us. Let's start with the professor. Hey, yes,
Yes.
Professor. Thank you.
I agree with Dr. Sasi. He said that energy will still be a very important geopolitical tool, okay, among the rivalry among nations, okay. So that I think in the short term, in the middle term, it is inevitable, okay. But I think most nations, including the West and China or any country, should have a long term, okay, a long term vision, okay, towards use of renewable energy, okay. So. So we will work in parallel. In the short term, we still need to face the geopolitical reality of energy rivalry, okay, or leverage. This is cannot be avoided. But in the long term, we still need to even in the short term we do not have any interest. Okay, we still to study and research and get prepared. Okay, so that I think it is good for the long term future of the whole mankind.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Yes, Miss Joanna, would you summarize your maybe thoughts at the moment? Share with us.
Yeah,
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. I would say that even amidst the uncertainty today, it remains very important that we still remain committed to getting to net zero, and the energy transition is a very key part to getting there, which is why, from Singapore's angle, we are very happy to work with our partners around the world, and we encourage anyone who is keen to work with us as well to reach out to us, and we are happy to explore any collaborations together. So with that, thank you as well for the invitation to speak at this panel.
Thank you, Joanna. Now, lastly, yes, Francesco, are you there? Francesco? Okay. I think there is a technical problem. Okay. Thanks very much. So in the quite right time, we are finalizing our panel. Thanks to everyone, especially thanks to our ministry. And have a good day in Brazil, and with our warm thoughts. So thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all thank Turkey, who is one of our member states, for hosting this brief illustration of a very important aspect which is not naturally taken into account by the COP, which is the Mediterranean. In the United Nations system, the Mediterranean does not exist. It's divided in 3 negotiation groups: the Arab group, the European Union, and the other states. But still something happens that, although it does not exist in the negotiations, it exists in reality. And what happens around the Mediterranean, in the Euro-Mediterranean area with climate change, is a united dynamic. It has some perspectives, and these perspectives do not only belong to the people of the Mediterranean, because what happens here affects global balances. The interests of 3 continents converge on the Mediterranean. It's Europe, it's Asia, and it's Africa. So the organization that I represent, called the Union for the Mediterranean, which is an intergovernmental organization, 43 member states, all the states of the European Union plus all the other states around the Mediterranean, came here 5 years ago to the COP to say, hey, we are not in the negotiation dynamics, but we exist as a problem, and it is a global problem. So what I will try to do is to illustrate to you the challenge and the hope that the Mediterranean represents. The Mediterranean is generally regarded as a quite advanced place, which is not among the really threatened ones. But as it happens, it is the second fastest warming region in the world. Not only, the Mediterranean Sea is the fastest warming sea globally. And associated to these two measures, there are some predicted impacts that we verified through a hard work of scientists. And it would take me the whole day to list you all these impacts. But let me just quote two. We are foreseeing in a very short period, within 10, maximum 15 years, 250 million people in water scarcity. And since the Mediterranean Sea is the fastest warming, it is also the fastest rising. Sea level rise is not only due to the fact that there are glaciers that thaw, that melt on land, and that their water comes to the sea. It is also due to dilatation of water. The warmer a material is, the larger it becomes. So we are foreseeing that the level of the Mediterranean will increase by more than 1 meter before the end of the century. And everybody understands that 1 meter is dangerous, but the end of the century doesn't seem something that belongs to us. It's far away in time. But we also know that in 15 years, more or less, the level of the Mediterranean will raise by more 20 centimeters. If you see 20 centimeters, you're not scared. What is that? Is this really a danger? It's because people think of a problem of water covering the land. Maybe they think about fragile coastal cities that will be more exposed, like Venice in Italy, like Alexandria in Egypt. And I know of some Greek and Turkish locations, but it's not. But the problem is not water covering the lands. It is salty water entering the coastal plains. I am Italian by nationality, but by the way, my grandmother was Turkish. And my ancestors are the Romans. And the Romans had a wicked wisdom. They used to say that if you want to submit someone, a population, you should beat them at war. But if you want to never hear about them again, you should spread salt on their fields, because salt sterilizes the soils. They are not productive anymore. Now, 20 more centimeters increase, which is forecasted in 10-15 years, is enough to salinize a lot of the water resources of the coastal plains, where 42% of food security in the region is concentrated, and it is particularly dangerous in the river deltas. It is dangerous for the Po in Italy, it is dangerous for the Rhone in France, but wow, we have the Nile, and that's a problem. 20 centimeters increase in sea level in the Mediterranean is enough to salinize the delta of the Nile, which means putting in jeopardy the food security of a state that has more than 100 million inhabitants and already has other problems. You don't need a geostrategist magician, you don't need a rocket scientist, to understand how dangerous all this is for our stability. But even if I continued illustrating all these predicted impacts, and there are many, 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 forest fires, droughts, and things like that, we would not grasp the problem. The real problem is that this is destroying our identity. If you look at this map, you might think again about something that probably has already crossed your mind. The idea of Europe is strange. If you apply the criteria through which we have singled out all the other continents, our name should be West Asia. But still, we consider ourselves a continent. We want to be a continent. Although we are very different and we have fought very violently during centuries, we think we belong to the same family. Something similar happens on the southern shore of the Mediterranean. It is Africa, but it is not Africa. It's similar to us. Again, we think we are very different between the north and the south of the Mediterranean, but actually we look alike. Our habits have different labels, but they are very similar. And myself, I think I am an example. I am an Italian citizen. My mother is Greek, my grandmother is Turkish, and my father was born in Sicily. It means that probably 60% of my blood is Phoenician. We are one community, and we are different somehow from what surrounds us. But what is the foundation of this identity? Yes, of course, it's history and culture, but there is a deeper foundation to it, and it was already understood 3 centuries ago by a guy called Montesquieu. Montesquieu asked himself the same question. Why are we different in a place that geographically is not separated from the rest? And he came with the reply, we are who we are because we are the children of this very, very special climate that blessed our region. If I sent in the streets a TV troupe to ask people what is the most important revolution in history, probably they would reply the Industrial Revolution or maybe the French Revolution. But people forget that there has been another revolution which was much more fundamental in shaping who we are and how we behave. And it happened longer ago, roughly 10,000 years ago, with the end of the last ice age, there was the agricultural revolution. It was the moment in which mankind shifted from being passive users of the ecosystems, hunters-gatherers, to managers of the ecosystem. We started managing the territories. And it happened a little bit all over the world. But in our region, the Mediterranean, it happened more systemically. It was a more general change. It started in the so-called Fertile Crescent, soon expanded to Anatolia, then came to Southern Europe. But why did it happen so extensively in our region? Not because here we had smarter people, but because here we had the perfect conditions. You know, when scientists describe climate change, they talk about an increase in temperature, which is technically correct. And it gives you the idea that it is a problem of heat. But this is not heat. It's an unbalance in the energy balance of our planet. Our planet used to receive a certain quantity of energy from the cosmos and send back the same amount of energy. Now, with the greenhouse effect, we are intaking a huge quantity of energy, the equivalent of 400,000 atom bombs a day. All this energy does one thing, that is, it makes climate more violent and it increases temperature here and there, but above all, it makes climate unpredictable. You don't know anymore how climate behaves. And if you don't know how climate behaves, you don't know how to organize your territories. Well, in a place like this, where there is this very vast mass of water, the Mediterranean Sea, which is not oceanic, it's used to stabilize climate. It absorbed excess heat during summer, released it gradually during winter, and this way we had not only a sweeter climate favorable to productivity, but we had a stable climate, a climate that you can predict. And this is why the agricultural revolution was strong here, because this was a place where people knew when it was going to rain. This was a place where people roughly knew when spring was going to begin. And this is what funded our unity, except that now, with the fact that the Mediterranean is intaking so much energy, it is the fastest warming sea in the world, its function is reverting from an engine of predictability, of stability, it is becoming an engine of chaos. All this energy intaken by the sea is transmitted to the atmosphere, and things that we used to take for granted, it's warm in spring, we cannot take for granted anymore. But this is not only a problem for agriculture. This is the foundation of our identity. We are who we are because we are in a place where climate was predictable. Not only. Another pillar of our unity was the fact that the good season in this area was governed by the entrance of the so-called Azores anticyclone. It arrived regularly and it covered roughly most of Europe and North Africa. Now, with global warming, the Azores anticyclones is being elbowed out by African anticyclones, which not only are drier, but this is not the problem. The problem is that they cut Europe in two. And if you agree with me that our climate is what determines our identity and our interests, it means that inside the European Union, interests are starting to diverge. And it seems such, like an anthropology talk, but it's very concrete. Let me just give you an example. We are the second fastest warming region in the world, but there is one which is warming even faster, which is the Arctic. It comes with a lot of problems, but also with some potentials. By the fact that the ice is disappearing, for instance, there are some maritime routes that used to be mythical. The Northwest Passage on top of Alaska and the Northeast Passage on top of Siberia. Sorry. With ice disappearing, they are becoming commercially viable and they have a lot of value, estimated between $9 and $11 billion a year. Of course, we are happy if our northern friends, together with lots of problems like permafrost thawing and things like that, also have some advantages. But it is also true that if the Northeast Passage on top of Siberia becomes operational, the Suez Canal is worth nothing. And the Mediterranean, as the sea of passage of 25% of global maritime commerce, is not there anymore. Of course, I'm not preaching that we should start preparing to have the south against the north. No, it will be the most stupid thing to do. But we need to interiorize this and understand that a changing climate is totally disrupting the reasons of who we are, how our interests are distributed. Thanks God, together with these divisive trends, there are also new unifying trends. This slide, which I know is totally incomprehensible, refers to the sectors of forestry. We don't think a lot about forestry, but it moves a lot of money. It's all the timber for construction, paper, cellulose, and things like that. In these sectors, spontaneously, we have witnessed an increase in cooperation between the North and the South, without the government intervening. Why? Simply because they know that what is today viable, commerciable in the South is what can save Southern European agriculture and forestry in 10, 15 years' time. If you're familiar with the sector of wine and vine, You know that climate bands are migrating north very fast. We are already talking about producing champagne in Denmark. Maybe, but during some time, maybe the grapes will be produced in Denmark, but the know-how will still be in France. Maybe very soon, the places that produced olive oil, excuse me, will have to produce argan oil. But in Southern Europe, we don't have the phytogenetic heritage, the plants. We don't have the know-how. So there is something that emerges, which is what we are doing with my organization. We think that around the Mediterranean, although it is a place where negotiating groups clashes, for instance, for loss and damage, the Arab group is not on the same line with the European Union. Yes, on some things we clash, but we decided one thing, that we have one rule. There is only one way to solve this crisis. And it is all the more necessary because climate change is dangerous here, not only because the impacts are severe, but also because the Mediterranean is highly asymmetric. It is a place of rich and poor. These percentages describe international exchanges in our region. 90% happens among northern states, 9% between the north and the south, only 0.9% among South Shore states. It tells a story of a sea around which there are the rich and the poor, the strong and the weak. This kind of impacts on an homogeneous area wouldn't be so dangerous. On such a fragmented and dishomogeneous area, they are indeed dangerous. So what can we do? We can do one thing which makes the Mediterranean much more advanced than any level these negotiations have reached. That is to recognize that I need you, you need me. The European Union wants to decarbonize by 2050. It is quantitatively impossible if you don't rely on the solar potential of the south and on the wind potential of the Balkans. In turn, these potentials cannot really develop if they only rely on internal markets. There wouldn't be enough finance. So I need you, you need me. In agriculture and food security, the southern part of Europe will soon have a climate that we don't know how to handle, but our brothers in the south have been knowing for thousands of years, and they have developed ways to do that. I need you, you need me, and I could multiply the examples over and over. Well, let's skip this part because it's about threats that surround us. And let's come to this part. To give you an example of what we are trying to do as Union for the Mediterranean, I will quote one chapter of the climate negotiations, which is kind of tense, which is called technology transfer. It is tense because we have to be sincere. It is tense because technology transfer is understood as the generous gift of those who are beautiful, rich, and advanced towards those who are not. But what is technology? Technology is know-how, and there is not only the latest industrial know-how. If you go along the Silk Road, you will often find buildings like that one, cone-shaped. It has a Persian name. It's called a yakshal. Literally, it means a fridge. It was used by merchants to deposit perishable goods, and it has one characteristic. No matter how hot it is outside, inside the temperature is always between 0 and -4. You want to have a really nice temperature in the desert, forget about air conditioning. See what the traditional Arab buildings were like. See how the Persians were able to produce ice in their caves. See how the Arabs were able to grow gardens in the desert through a system called the Qanat. And I could go on and on and on. So, who needs who? This is the message we're bringing to the COP. We are fighting too much. The whole problem is solved if we simply recognize that we all need each other, that we all have something to give. And by the way, if we do that, we end up solving all the various asymmetries. Because an economy in which I need you, you need me, is an economy where people naturally circulate, is an economy where differences in income are rebalanced. And so this is a message. by trying to solve climate change the right way, actually as a gift that we were not really looking for, we're also building the conditions for peace. Thank you very much. There was a glitch. This was not meant to be a single-handed event. I found myself explaining you all these things. I hope it was interesting, and I don't know if you have any questions. I'm here. Debate and above all objections, which are the most interesting. Then okay, thank you so much for your attention. We are just happy that we could pass our message, and thank you so much to the Turkish pavilion. But there is one question. I don't know how it works with mics.
Thank you so much for your great presentation. And I think how you've closed your presentation is kind of amazing. But I was just wondering how the principle of you need me, I need you could reach among the parties and understand that for us to address the current climate crisis, we all need each other. I don't know to what extent this message, if you've got an opportunity to speak to parties, and especially what, for example, tech thinks about how we need to take the route of how we address the current problems, either in agriculture, in energy, and everything that you're talking about in this scope becomes quite critical for us to examine our approach and methodology to think about what would it be in the next 50 years if we continue fighting and not coming together to address the crisis. So I would want just your comment, how, because I believe and I feel that this principle is quite powerful and it can change the room and the atmosphere within the COP. Thank you so much. I'm Michael from Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. You know, for many years I've been a negotiator. Now, since I belong to an international organization, I'm an observer. And so I observe. And what I observe is that slowly this idea is creeping in. We have a 30 years old negotiation that gets on according to the old rules, which is me against you. But slowly, you know, I've been to various events and they were all about how we cooperate, how your solution is scalable to my country, with some themes that are not exactly saying this, but they are actually saying this. For instance, there is a great importance which is given more and more to young people. I see young people as the opposite of the idea of I am one country against the other. I see young people working together here. This is one thing. And then even, I don't know how effective the negotiations will be in the end, but after two COPs, which were concentrated on the old theme of energy, now we have a COP that goes back to the value of ecosystem services, indigenous people. It's not saying I need you, you need me, but it's like saying I need you, you need me. And if you hear the talks in the negotiations, some very old revendication language, it's there because there is some inertia. But then the people understand. In the end, what we need is not to affirm the principle of loss and damage, that you were guilty and I was, okay, there is this part, we cannot deny it. But then what is practical? What is practical is that everyone can give to everyone because we all have something something to give. And if it's not technology, it's societal solutions. There are civilizations that simply do not pollute, not because they don't produce, but because they organize their relationship with the territory in a way that is sustainable. They organize their society in a way which is sustainable because it's less top-down, because there are less differences in income and things like that. So I am hopeful, but I presented it as the Mediterranean position. It is indeed, but I think it's becoming universally understood. Now, we cannot get out of this terrible mess if we just don't recognize that we need each other and that we need to cooperate instead of fight. You know? Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. We have a small tiny pavilion, which is this year more a box than a pavilion. We don't have all the streaming and things like that. But you're welcome to come and visit us if you wish. It's that way. Thank you.
My name is Lucila Serra. I will be the moderator today. I work at South Pole as a regional director for policy and strategy in LATAM. But then I'm going to have these distinguished panelists sharing their views and their experience with their companies as part of the carbon markets actors, and to share how are they working currently in the carbon markets, how do they see Article 6 implementation, and I will let them introduce themselves, and then we can start. So if you would like to start introducing yourself, where you work, and what is on your daily basis, why it's related to Article 6 mechanism. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So my name is David Rademacher. I work for E.ON. E.ON is the largest grid operator, energy grid operator in Europe. And we've been active in the voluntary carbon market for years now. So we usually compensated on approximately 2 to 3 million tons a year voluntarily on product basis. And we're also part of the LEAF coalition. So we've been always active also in shaping the voluntary carbon market. So the latest developments on Article 6, of course, are of strategic importance to E.ON.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. My name is Eric Pitt, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Emergent, which is also the organizer of the LEAF Coalition, which some of you may be aware of, and which E.ON is a part of, so thank you for that. In my role, I'm focused on working with corporates and other market participants to generate demand for carbon credits in the voluntary carbon markets, to some extent in the compliance markets that are emerging, and we'll be very focused on the Article 6 opportunities as well. So thank you.
And thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Lucila, for moderating. So my name is Ben Rattenbury. I work for a company called Solvera. We're a carbon data platform and ratings agency, and my role is VP Policy. So I lead on engagement with governments, with multilaterals such as the World Bank, and trying to understand what's happening with Article 6 and what that means for the future of carbon credit markets, both voluntary markets, but also compliance markets, CORSIA, and so on. My background is in the UK government as a carbon markets negotiator, and it's very interesting to be following the negotiations now, but not having to follow every single comma on every text, because that can be quite tiring. So yeah, happy to be here today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for your presentations. So as you all know, and that's why I assume you're here, you're interested in Article 6 implementation. Obviously, as we know that after COP29, where the Article 6 rulebook was approved, and now we're looking into real action, right? What is Article 6 really? And how is that going to be implemented? How do we see all the actors and the corporate sector involved? And I think that's part of what we would like to hear today. As you know, there's more and more activity related to Article 6, and countries, both on demand side and supply side, are working towards implementing their Article 6 institutional arrangements. We see some activities with ITMO transaction, but obviously still slow, and it's evolving, right? And now we will see how, for example, in the region where I work, Latin America, Chile has issued the first LOA, letter of authorization, which actually will give set the rules for transferring the ITMOs, and we'll see other countries moving forward, and there's starting to be more and more activity. So I would like to start with questions in terms of the implementation of Article 6, right, and the impact. I would like to ask David, as representative of E.ON, how do you see the impact? How do you see that it's going to evolve into implementation and real action on the ground, and how do you see E.ON as a buyer, as a part of the demand side, evolving in that landscape? I would like to hear your thoughts.
So first of all, I believe there's a consensus amongst many stakeholders that we need to have a framework on the voluntary carbon market in place that can set a framework for decades to come. And there's a need for tradable emission reductions globally. And we've seen from a corporate point of view that there have been, we call it the carbon market roller coaster. You know, we had the CDM, we had now the latest controversies in the voluntary carbon market. And finally, after 10 years after Paris, we're talking about implementation of Article 6. And that's really important because it can actually establish some certainty, some clarity, some reliability, and that's important for companies to invest. We've seen initiatives like the Leaf Coalition in the last years. So there is an engagement on the corporate level already in public-private partnerships. So always on the intersection to host jurisdictions with donor governments. And I think that's really important that we now re-establish trust in the market, because that's really important for companies to act.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask Eric, as a leading NGO behind the Leaf Coalition, how do you see Article 6 as part of how it will accelerate the funding and the channeling of funds to the forests and much needed finance?
Is it? Thanks for the question. Maybe I'll just. First of all, we see the implementation of Article 6 last year at COP29 as great news for the carbon markets and as an important step forward for the channeling of finance to all kinds of climate solutions, including nature-based solutions like preserving tropical rainforests, but other types of projects and fund schemes as well. And we see it as a great way to increase funding alongside the existing markets, the voluntary markets and the compliance markets such as they are. It's really important to create additional channels of financing because the scope of the problem is so big, and so we need a lot of funding to tackle that. So that's really important. Article 6.2 already allows donor countries to work with jurisdictions that are issuing carbon credits, whether they be nature-based, forest-related credits or other types. And so that's important, and it's a key mechanism that has had some success. Article 6.4 will create another really important channel for transactions of high-integrity jurisdictional forest protection credits. And so it'll be welcomed along with the emergence of additional national compliance markets, such as what exists right now in Singapore or in other markets, Japan, Australia, which can potentially connect in with those Article 6.4 markets to drive demand for forest credits. It's great to have another option, Article 6.2, Article 6.4, there are additional financing options. But it is really critical ultimately for all of these different markets to converge. I think there is the possibility of Article 6 being the framework around which all these pieces of the carbon market converge, but that is not a guarantee. And so it will require the continued push by all parties involved in the carbon markets to agree on standards, to coalesce around a single set of well-argued, well-considered standards for what types of credits count, for how parties should transact, for how those transactions are recorded. There's been a lot of focus in the market on both the integrity of the issuance of credits to make sure that they really embody a ton of improvement, but also on the integrity of the buyers to make sure that they're using credits for, not for greenwashing, but for credible and meaningful claims. And I think something like Article 6, which looks at the international transaction of carbon credits, really also highlights the importance for a high integrity system on which all of that can rest, and for transactions to move, where the credits are sold from originally perhaps, say, the government of the state of Pará here in Brazil, where we are right now, to potentially an airline in Northern Europe that may be purchasing them. It's important that in the transference of that credit from one party to another, and in the transference of the money from the buyer to the seller, that's also a high integrity process, and that you don't see the vast majority of those funds end up enriching, for-profit middlemen that are buying low and selling high, but that rather the vast majority of the proceeds generated from the sale go to the sellers. And I think a single common framework like Article 6 provides at least the possibility for some agreed standards around that. Oops. But until then, Until then, the voluntary markets do provide an important option for forest governments. I just want to mention for a minute, we're really happy that we were able to announce this week a transaction with the Côte d'Ivoire. So we've signed a transaction with Côte d'Ivoire to channel over $20 million to them. Those credits are from a program called the FCPF. For those that aren't familiar with it, the FCPF is a high integrity forest protection program that was implemented by the World Bank. It was initially financed with funds from a variety of donor governments, and many countries, including Côte d'Ivoire, have overperformed their targets set under the FCPF. So they've had more reductions in deforestation than they had originally signed up for under the program. And they're able to monetize that additional performance in the form of the sale of these excess credits. So we're really excited that we were able to deliver funding that's another 50% on top of what they received from the World Bank already so far. And we hope that we can do more transactions like that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So from the Silvera perspective, now you're working on a daily basis to assess the quality of the credits that are being issued. So now with the implementation of Article 6, how do you see these, the changes that are coming? How do you envisage what's going to be the new requirements, or are you changing your rating systems so you can adapt to this evolving market?
Thank you very much, Lucila, and agree with everything that we've heard from David and Eric, and congratulations to Eric on the $200 million to Côte d'Ivoire. That's absolutely huge. Many millions, and yes, we are working on trying to raise the bar for credit quality every day, even on a Saturday. It's great to be here. But when we think about Article 6, it's not one thing, right? Article 6 is lots of different things, and actually it's quite a strange set of things. From the point of view of credit quality, I'd say Article 6 is three different things. Article 6.2, of course, which is essentially a voluntary credit or a credit from an independent crediting standard that has a corresponding adjustment applied to it. So the government agrees to account for it in a certain way against its NDC, and then on the other side, it can be accounted either by an airline through Corsia or by a buying government towards their NDC, or potentially even by a corporate to just cancel it for a kind of overall environmental benefit. But essentially a 6.2 credit is a voluntary credit with the corresponding adjustment. And then the two other types of Article 6 credit, of course, we have Article 6.4, but there's two very important types of Article 6.4 credits. There's the CDM transition credits, the first 6.4 credits, they're all from the CDM, and they are essentially a political compromise from Glasgow, from COP26 in 2021. I won't be rude and call it a dirty political compromise, but we can all understand that the quality of the old CDM credits is not going to be as high as the quality of the new Article 6.4 credits that are coming on stream in the next few years. So I think when we look at Article 6.4 or the PACM, the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, we have to distinguish between the CDM transition credits on the one hand, which can be issued from 2021 to 2025, and then the PACM native credits, which are credits issued on the new methodologies that are going to be agreed through the PACM. We've had the first one agreed just a few weeks ago on landfill methane. And it's the same projects. They will be CDM transition projects, and then they have to move on to the new methodologies. But all of this to say that when we consider credit quality in the context of Article 6, it's not one thing. The 6.2 credits can be as good or as bad as any credit in the voluntary market. And really, we are relying on the dynamic that we see in the VCM, where the buyers are reputationally sensitive, and that's why they want to buy high quality credits. They don't want to be on the front page of The Guardian buying junk credits. They don't want to be told off by their CFO for wasting money on credits that they can't do anything with. So this creates an incentive towards high quality credits in the VCM, just the same way as it does under Article 6.2. Under Article 6.4, I think a lot of countries will shy away from buying the CDM transition credits because they will recognize them as having relatively low environmental integrity compared to current standards. And then the PACM native credits that are going to come on stream in the next few years, we don't actually know how many of those there'll be. Because what we hear from project developers is that the requirements are so stringent that it's going to be extremely challenging to issue any credit. The project economics don't really add up. So it's an open question whether we will have significant volumes of PACM native credits. So it's a very mixed picture on Article 6. In general, it is a good thing for credit integrity that the PACM standards are being set very high. And we know that that is starting to filter through. For example, Gold Standard and Independent Crediting Standard are underway a process to align all of their crediting methodologies with the PACM. So we're starting to see the rules agreed by negotiators just down the hall starting to filter into the voluntary market standards as well. So all of this is kind of part of the evolution of carbon markets. They never stand still, and that's why they're never boring. But in general, credit quality is on the up. We find that the ratings of the credits that are being issued on average are improving all the time. It's still a very mixed picture, but the average credit quality is improving all the time. The average credit quality of what's being retired is also improving all the time. There's still a way to go before everything is AAA, but I think the developments under Article 6 are a positive direction for credit quality.
I think you would like to respond. If you can share the microphone, and if you put it closer to your mouth because it's harder.
Okay, we put it closer to our mouth. Ben, I just would like to respond to this, and I would like to even go further, because you said companies want to buy high integrity credits. Now, there is really no early mover advantage for corporates right now. Even the most ambitious companies that might be a bit European focused, but even the most ambitious companies with good intentions have been subject to greenwashing allegations. In the context of the Green Claims Directive, that really led to controversies. I mean, we talked about the integrity of projects and the integrity of the use case on the buyer side, but we saw that companies really refrain from going into the voluntary carbon market because there's nothing to win. You know, so even if you want to buy credits, you want to contribute, there was the risk of greenwashing allegations was simply too high. It was unmanageable. I always said we probably spend just as much on carbon credits as for office supplies, but the due diligence was so much higher. You know, I was compared the amount of money we spend on voluntary carbon credits to pencils, but we had to have a due diligence in place. The amount involved of work simply was just as high on medium-sized projects, you know, so that was completely off. And now I think it's really about, if we want to establish Article 6 credits as the framework for decades, it's really about early mover from a jurisdictional point of view, from donor governments, to create the trust and also create the acceptance for these credits in the market.
Yeah, thank you. And we've seen that those uncertainties and how the appetite has changed, right? And that we see that from both sides. No, they're trying to do from the supply side, countries and project owners are developing and are working really hard. And we've seen that with Article 6.2, it's taken years really, and as we've been developing a portfolio of projects in Latin America and worldwide, and it takes time. You need certainty, obviously, regulations that are in place or are getting there. It takes time, capacity building, obviously, technical and financial needs that are to have the right staff in place to be able to be aligned with their NDCs. Obviously, the positive list that we've seen emerging in the different countries, right? And we see that at least with our experience working with both demand and supply side, sometimes there's a mixed match, and there's refraining to engage in certain projects or in certain involuntary carbon market instead of compliance markets, as you mentioned. So I wanted to ask you in terms of challenges, right? Because we've seen and we've heard about the different challenges in both markets. We've seen how they are converging, right? And Article 6.2, as you rightly mentioned, is a white canvas. It has, it's been more creative, but at the same time, it's using the standards and the methodologies that are available, creating others depending on who the buyer is, right? Sometimes you have to go through different methodologies approval, or the countries, even the host countries, are developing their own methodologies or intending to do that, right? But I would say in terms of the challenges as Ian, and how do you see and how do you plan to address those challenges related to Article 6 and the supply and acquisition of Article 6 credits?
Yeah, I think we'll closely watch the developments over the next month and weeks because there's quite some open questions still, and the acceptance for Article 6 credits on the customer side, also in the on the NGO side, actually, it will really depend on creating a broader acceptance through donor government involvement. Once we see Western governments stepping in and creating this trust in the market, that will lead to corporate involvement as well. And of course, we will. I think the one challenge I do see, not from a corporate point of view, but rather from a system point of view, is we see that governments in the global south are preparing, and there's high expectations. We know in Uganda that bureaucratic processes are established. They are all preparing the processes. They're staffing the processes. They're well prepared to kick it off. But they're expecting also governments now to step in and really kick off that market. And we risk to lose lose the trust in the market and lose the support of the host governments if we don't kick it off timely. You know? So that's really important because then after new elections, these processes will be killed if they're not leading to money flows into projects.
Thank you. And I would like to hear your view on this, on the type of JRED projects or Article 6 related credits. And for you, Emergent, how do you envisage?
Great. Well, thank you again. I think one important follow-on to what you were just saying, I think the host jurisdictions that are trying to issue credits, particularly in some of the newer jurisdictional standards, are finding many times that they are not well prepared for all of the paperwork, for all of the process, for the documentation that has to be provided to all the different interested parties. If they're trying to issue corresponding adjustments, the whole UNFCCC process to complete that, it's difficult and it often requires capacity building. And so, as David said, many countries are investing in that, and many organizations, philanthropic organizations or donor governments are investing in that. But there is a risk when it takes so long, when the process is as complicated as it is, and all these countries and regions have done all this work, and then the finance doesn't flow until not only the environmental results are there, but then the years of paperwork are completed. There's a risk that they get frustrated, right? There's a risk that they look for shortcuts. And I think we're already seeing just a few cases of some deals that are being announced where all of a sudden it's like, well, wait, we'd established all these high integrity standards, and now there's people talking about, $1 million of transactions, and there's no longer a standard involved because people are frustrated and it's taking too long. So that's a real risk. So I think the solution isn't to not use the standards that are going to underlie the integrity, but it's to make sure that there's more resources and that we can all just move faster. Because I think we're starting to see a little bit of a backlash against just how difficult it is for some of these global south regions to satisfy all those requirements. So I just want to start with that comment. But we do see very positive demand dynamic for jurisdictional RED+. I think the whole world understands the value in ending and reversing deforestation, not just because forests are such a huge carbon sink and deforestation is such a huge percentage of global emissions, but also because forests are the site of biodiversity, forests are the home to indigenous peoples, and without forests, we sort of lose the planet as we know it. And there's all kinds of benefits that come from that biodiversity and the forests, all the life that's there, clean water, the organic compounds that make pharmaceuticals, other types of inventions. So I think there's a lot of spiritual alignment in the market, if you will. But there had been a lot of RED+ projects that sort of were found to be lacking. And so jurisdictional, I think, is an approach that solves many of those issues. And so there is a lot of optimism and a lot of interest in those credits. But, again, before switching into talking about Article 6, just to touch again on this issue of what is the business case for buyers to purchase credits. As David was mentioning, many companies that did things that were high integrity, that tried to follow all the guidance provided by NGOs that was available at that time, that consulted with everybody who would answer their questions and tried to do everything right, still got criticized. And so then you have this question of like, okay, we're both spending money and it's like a net negative in terms of how the world views us, and we're safer just doing nothing. And you see many companies that have adopted that approach. And I don't support that approach, and I hope that companies can get past that and more companies can just do the right thing, whether it's regulated or whether it's not. But I very much understand that decision making. I understand how a board that's tasked with fiscal responsibility, that has a fiduciary responsibility, not only to how they spend their money, but to what types of risk they take in the market. It's understandable, that hesitation. But we do have over 30 companies in the LEAF Coalition, big global companies that, the likes of H&M, Bayer, Amazon, many others that you would have heard of. And we have 4 donor governments. Together, they've made an advanced market commitment of over $1 billion to support jurisdictional RED Plus programs. But in addition, that sort of early advanced market commitment has translated into $300 million of signed contracts, where there's actually binding obligation to purchase credits when they're issued. And we've got about 25 million in actually, sort of transacted volume where the credits have been issued. So it's all working its way through the system. And we do see strong interest in some of the new deals that we're working on, like in Cote d'Ivoire, as I mentioned, and we signed an LOI in the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso this week. So we're very excited to try to bring more finance to them. And I guess just one more plug for the sort of international growth of demand. The LEAF Coalition has included American and European companies until now, but we just brought in our first Chinese company. Tencent has joined the LEAF Coalition. I think many of the tricky parts of the carbon markets in Europe and the United States, I think it's different in Asia. I think they're less conflicted about the need to act. There's less of a concern for criticism. And so we're really excited to welcome Asian companies into the jurisdictional RED ecosystem. Switching to the challenges of Article 6.4 specifically, I think folks that have been following this closely will be aware, but there's an open question about the role of nature-based solutions in Article 6.4. And, I was a physics major in college, so I understand the need for fungibility of the actual, basically that the science has to be there and it has to be legitimate, that there has to be fungibility between the carbon benefits of different types of credits. And in the case of a nature-based solution, that probably means that there are additional safeguards that are needed, additional buffering pools that are required in order to make, a ton of avoided deforestation or even a ton of new forestation of removals credits equivalent to enhanced rock weathering or something, or direct air capture. But those are surmountable problems. And on the other side, we have this incredibly huge need for forests to be protected. And there are other sources of funding like the TFFF, which is getting built. But Article 6 is going to be, if Article 6 does not allow nature-based solutions, that's going to be a real blow to the market because many are going to view Article 6 as sort of the standard for everything else. And so we're really, really hoping, I was asked earlier on another panel, what is my one wish for COP6? And it's that the 6.4 negotiations are concluded so that people can move forward and that they're concluded in a way that allows for nature-based solutions because of how important they are to solving this climate crisis that we're all in. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and we've seen, as you mentioned, a little bit of winter of sustainability with companies trying to avoid certain credits or claims. But I think the market is evolving, and we agree on that. And it's obviously giving with the high integrity market and boards, and I think they're moving forward to that. Obviously, 6.2, 6.4, we're going to see how it evolves in the coming years. There's more than almost 100 bilateral agreements or MOUs signed, so countries are moving forward. It takes time from an MOU to an implementation agreement. It takes years. And even if countries have those agreements in place, to set up the joint committees and to really, as you mentioned, the lack of maybe either or capacity, it's still a learning by doing process, or funds and resources to really put the teams in place to be able to go through all the revision of documents, to work together with the different countries, the sovereign buyers, or that they're signing the agreement. So we'll see that that's going to take time, obviously, and it's moving forward. Maybe not at the pace that we would like to, but I wanted to ask you in terms of the type of companies, or when a company is trying to or developing their portfolio, what type of credits the type of projects or countries would you recommend, or do you see that are the ones that are more, that have a most appetite or are more mature in a way? And obviously those portfolios could be from any type of market, right? What would you be your recommendation for that portfolio creation?
Thank you very much, Lucila. I would recommend that companies buy good credits. That's the very short answer, but being a little bit longer than that, there's different types of buyers, and they all have different types of incentives and priorities. There's kind of three main types of buyers that I'd call out. There's buyers who are looking to meet a compliance obligation. For example, a company that is covered by Singapore's carbon tax, so they have the option to buy Article 6 credits in order to avoid paying more tax, essentially, to offset their tax liabilities. So there's the compliance use case. Then there's a corporate use case where it's essentially voluntary. So companies could choose to buy Article 6 credits with a corresponding adjustment and make a voluntary claim off the back of it. And some NGOs have suggested that that is the right thing to do morally. Some courts have even implied that as well, but it's not really a widely held view. And then the third use case that I'd call out is for the investor. So this is maybe a trading house or a bank or a project developer. They're looking to develop an Article 6 portfolio to produce credits that they can sell. So these three sets of users of the credits or buyers have very different incentives. So of course, for the compliance use case, you just really care about the eligibility. You want to know that the credits you're buying can be used for the purpose that you need them for. So that's straightforward enough. And beyond that, you probably care mostly about the price because everyone is price sensitive. And then beyond that, all things being equal, you'd probably like something to be high quality because it reduces any residual reputational risk that you may be concerned about. But in general, compliance buyers are less worried about reputational risk than voluntary carbon market buyers because they feel they're able to hide behind this idea that it's a compliance standard, they're just doing what they're told to do by the government or the regulating entity. For the voluntary buyer looking for adjusted credits because they think it's a better claim that they can make, I would say it's probably a bad idea. Personally, I think it's unhelpful to suggest that companies need to buy adjusted credits because it has caused a lot of confusion, and particularly amongst the host countries under Article 6, about when and how they should apply corresponding adjustments to their credits. It also then causes accounting confusion because the host country would account for the corresponding adjustments, so they would essentially put their own targets further out of reach. But then there's unlikely to be a corresponding adjustment on the other side of the ledger. And it's unclear even which registry would receive those credits in that context. So it really is a mess. And just to agree with something Eric said earlier, on Article 6, we've kind of created a monster. It is such a complex system that has been built. It is relatively robust, but it is definitely not simple or clear. And I think suggesting that corporates should buy adjusted credits for voluntary claims makes things even more difficult and more confusing. It also plays into a point that we just heard from David about this kind of variable levels of anxiety around the world when it comes to claims. If you're a German company, then you're very worried about offsetting litigation. You could end up in a regional consumer protection court at the drop of a hat, and then that will be a big headache for you, reputationally damaging, media concerns, all the rest of it. If you're an Asian company, you're less concerned about this because there's less of a culture, at least currently, of litigation on greenwashing. Time will tell whether that is a European affliction that spreads or something that remains and is hopefully contained within Europe. Apologies for the COVID analogy. And then if you're an investor, what you really care about is obviously maximizing your return. And the way that you do that, increasingly we're hearing, is you invest in super credits. What's a super credit? It's a credit with the widest possible range of use cases. It's a credit that has a CCP label, so it's approved by the ICVCM. It's a credit that has a AA, ideally a AAA rating. It's a credit that is coming with a corresponding adjustment or has the option to have a corresponding adjustment. So it can be used for CORSIA, it can be used for an NDC purpose. Ideally, it's also CORSIA eligible, so it's on an appropriate methodology. And ideally, it's also eligible for at least one compliance system, whether that's Singapore's carbon tax or South Africa's carbon tax, Colombia's carbon tax, and so on. In the 2030s, from 2035 onwards, you would want it to be eligible for the EU ETS, because we know that that's the compliance system with the highest price right now. So it's a long-winded way of saying that depending on your use case for the credits, there's a range of things you're looking for Article 6 that will help you identify what is most appropriate for you.
Yeah, I would like to quickly react to this because the last point you mentioned is really important. Ultimately, the next phase is about convergence of markets. So we need to, I mean, no one believes we will have one global CO2 price anytime soon. But if we manage to create convergence of markets, and that's compliance markets and voluntary markets, we of course increase the acceptance and the relevance of Article 6 credits. And strengthen the system. And I think that's super important. The EU now talks about 5% of the new NDC, the 2040 target, being applicable to the use of carbon credits, Article 6 credits. But this isn't thought through to the end because it's not answered how we make it relevant for the European trading system, ETS1, ETS2, and that's something we need to continue working on this with policymakers, with NGOs, with corporates to really create that convergence of markets.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to hear about the super credit. I'm sure everyone else here is too. Obviously, there's not such a perfect market, and we know that. I think that's something that it's been evolving and learning, and we've seen, as you said, that it's gradually converging, but there's still much more to be done. We've seen more demand and the EU ETS accepting that percentage. That was a question I was going to make, but good. Thank you for that, for referring that. And obviously that's key because we've seen that there are more and more buyers coming into the market, sovereign buyers, corporate buyers, Norway, Switzerland, Singapore, Japan, and well, now the EU ETS. And so we'll see how this is going to evolve and how fast, maybe as needed, maybe we need much more done faster, obviously. So I wanted to ask the three of you, like one last question. Obviously we can keep, I like the dialogue and the feedback from all of you and with your perspective, with your experience. So if you, in one sentence, what opportunity or risk Article 6 represents for climate protection and carbon market development over the next 5 years, if you have to say that, what would you say is that? I don't know if you understand. Sorry, so loud. If you had to summarize in one sentence, what opportunity or risk Article 6 represents for climate protection and global carbon market development over the 5 years, what would you say?
So ultimately, it's really about that 1 ton of CO2 reduced, avoided, is 1 ton of CO2 anywhere in the world. So it's really about if we manage to establish Article 6 as the framework for decades, then we significantly increase the efficiency of global climate action because we managed to find the most efficient way of reducing CO2 and in a global system. And so that convergence of markets is something that can really be a push for a further acceleration of climate action globally.
Yeah, it's hard to say that that's not the number one issue. Article 6.4, because it's a global framework, not only creates the possibility of a globally accepted market, but even to the extent that there are other markets outside of that, whether they're just the voluntary markets as they exist or specific compliance markets that might have slightly different requirements. if Article 6.4 is implemented successfully, if it's accepted across the world, it will create a baseline of standards for what's acceptable and what's seen as high quality that will permeate those other markets as well. I think there was a little bit of talk from Ben about the role of investors in the marketplace, and I think financial intermediaries and investors, I think there's sort of like positives and negatives to the growth of their participation in the market, but the significant positive is the amount of money they can bring and the willingness of investors to put money down up front on project development that will yield results later. If you look at, why does the world have a well-functioning system of airports? Why are there, lots of highways? Why is there a water system that works? It's because there were clear investable projects that investors could put money into with a high degree of confidence that they would ultimately be repaid and earn a return, even if they weren't the direct beneficiaries of those projects themselves. So, the carbon market needs that. There's nature-based solutions, there's technology-based solutions, and it has to become an investable asset class to bring in mainstream investors. I mean, there are donor governments, there are philanthropies, there are impact investors involved. But I mean, you want a product that you can just go to BlackRock and say, you should put $1 billion into this. You want to be able to go to insurance companies and say, you can take money from your pools of life insurance money and invest in these projects. And if you make them, if you can de-risk them sufficiently, they'll do that. For the right returns, they'll do it. And so standards are the way to de-risk. Standards and a confidence around demand. So the more this starts to look like a regulated compliance market, and the more that mainstream financial players and financial regulators start to get involved, even though it sounds kind of awful, the better for this market and the better for the future investability of this market. That wasn't one sentence, sorry.
It's good, thank you.
I think I just heard lots of commas, so that was a long sentence, but we can still technically count that in. I'm going to be boring and agree with my fellow panelists on what they've said, but just to add one word, literally, to answer your question. So the question is, what opportunity or risk Article 6 represents for climate protection and global market development over the next 5 years? I would say convergence. And that is both a risk and an opportunity. It's a risk because if the forces within the negotiations that are trying to exclude the viability of nature-based crediting prevail, I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible, then that convergence could be hugely damaging for nature-based crediting around the world, including jurisdictional crediting, which in general Silvera is very supportive of and is very grateful for the leadership from Leaf and Art on that. So convergence is a risk, but convergence is also an opportunity because as these rules come together, hopefully in a very sensible, pragmatic way, we will get clarity, confidence, scale. I've always said there's no point in having a carbon market that is low integrity because it won't achieve climate impact. There's no point having a carbon market that is low volume because even if it's high integrity, it still doesn't really have much of a contribution to the global climate crisis. You need a carbon market that is high integrity and high scale. And I think that convergence is potentially one of the best chances we have to achieve that.
Thank you so much. Yes, and as you said, Article 6 it's going to be utilized. It's being utilized as a tool, as a key tool, and that convergence is important. It's key. I like the one word. Thank you for that. Obviously, all of the comments are welcome, and I think it's good to hear it from the different perspectives and see, the importance, obviously, from a technology provider as well, including the new innovative technologies, and that gives that quality and traceability. No? So would you like to add anything else to the discussion, at least before we close? I think it's the good opportunity to share your thoughts and add anything else before we wrap up.
I think in the spirit of this COP, it's all about implementation and making use of it now. And let's get it done.
I would like to ask if anyone has a question here in the floor, and we have a few minutes.
Hello everyone, I'm Flavia. I lead Forest and Land Use at Planet Labs. And I have a more tech, let's say, question for the panelists. We know that many of the credibility, integrity, also scalability is related to technology. What it's coming now, the digital MRV. So I would like to ask the panelists, maybe principally Ben, what is the role of remote sensing in the Article 6.4? Because we know many of the methodology that's being designed now, it will rely on the credits, the certifiers that we already have, right? Remote sense is not something that's very useful, but I know that Silveira is one of the first rating companies to really use heavily remote sensing. So I would like to get the view, like what is the role of DMRV in integrity and all the challenges that you mentioned around Article 6, 6.2, 0.4, also 0.8, which is a non-market approach. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Many
You want to
people.
do one-on-one? Okay, I'll be brief. Thank you, Flavia, for the question. I hope that the role of DMRV in 6.4 is going to be very big. DMRV has some technical challenges, but they can be overcome. And in general, there's huge benefits from the scale, the speed, the accuracy, the cost, which can be lower. So it has the potential to be so much better on so many levels. It can really unlock a lot of finance. The challenge is that they haven't yet finalized the methodologies where this would come into play. Of course, nature-based crediting is where this has the most potential. In fact, jurisdictional scale nature-based crediting is where it has the most potential for impact, because obviously large scale, you rely on remote sensing. You cannot go with a tape measure and measure every single tree in Côte d'Ivoire. So I really hope that the discussions around the role of non-permanence and therefore nature-based crediting reach a sensible conclusion very quickly, and that facilitates pragmatism on the use of DMRV. Of course, it doesn't just apply to nature-based crediting. Cook stove products can benefit from this as well. So it's very important that the PACM sees the potential for technology and moves with the times rather than keeping a kind of an old-fashioned CDM hat on.
And I would like to add, obviously, registries, no? Registries that countries are developing or implementing or utilizing will be are key for that, the transparency, the traceability, to have the data. And most of our countries, I'm from Argentina, we know how, it takes time, and some are already using different registries and putting in place and to use that MRV. Obviously, new technologies make it easier now than before, than 10 years ago. So I think we see that there's going to be more work on that, and it's needed part of the, as part of the, to follow the corresponding adjustments, to make sure that there's traceability, as I mentioned. And we'll see how those registries are, that infrastructure that is needed, where the money is coming from, how each country is deciding if they're going to have their own registries or they will utilize the ones that are available. So I think registries are a key part of the MRV too. We have another question.
Hello. Oh. Hi. I'm Gilly from Canada, from the Climate Solutions Prize. You can't hear me? Closer. All right. So you were addressing compliance and conversions in all the different markets. What I want you to maybe double click on, if you will, is with the world heading towards polycrisis and a steady continuing growth of emissions, how do you get to net zero, which is in your tagline, or even beyond, like to net negative?
Just to make sure I got the question, we're seeing emissions go up, and so how can we really credibly sit here and talk about net zero? Is that, yeah? Or even being net negative, hopefully one day. I mean, that is a really tough one, and I don't think any of us are going to have a pat answer for it. I think it's easy to say, oh, well, you do that by stop using fossil fuels. But, I mean, none of us are here if there's not fossil fuels. We all can make small decisions in our life to try to lower our impact, but it's bigger than any one person, and it's so complicated because it's easy to point one's finger at countries like where I come from, at the United States, or at Russia or China, or the big wealthy nations in Europe that have high emissions. And so maybe they need to be the ones to lead the cutting. And maybe one day the United States will actually get its act together and become a leader in that. But for much of the rest of the world, where the quality of life is just not on par with those countries, I don't see how we're gonna build renewable energy as fast as we can. So it's so complicated, right? I mean, I think the critical thing is that bringing all these people together to talk about these issues, it raises the importance of, it helps people globally understand, people who are not, lots of people don't know what COP30 is. It helps people broadly, hopefully, understand the importance of all of these initiatives, energy efficiency, protecting the forests, all of the rest of it. But it is a messy and complicated issue, so it's just going to take a lot more hard work and a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean, Article 6 alone won't solve it. But what we see is, we always look at Germany in terms of renewable energies and in the electricity mix, because Germany has achieved now almost 2/3 of the power mix to be renewable. And we've just run a whole weekend on 100% renewables. At the same time, China in the last half year has built more renewables than Germany in the last 20 years. So, and that development, we see renewables are the cheapest form of electricity production anywhere in the world. And it's the fastest exponential growth we have ever seen in energy technology in humankind. So, and at the same time, I'll give you one example. In Bavaria, the southern German state Bavaria, there's more PV solar installed than in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. So what Article 6 can solve is to create that financing, to close the financing gap for investments into renewables in the global south. So there's massive potential, although we currently already see that exponential growth in renewables. And that is something in terms of numbers where we see that gives us hope.
I love this question because it's kind of the question, right? Why are we all here? Why do we all fly here? Why do we all spend so much money and time and effort? The scale of the challenge can be overwhelming. It can be depressing. The one thing that actually really inspires me is every time I look in the mirror, I need to recognize I'm old. And my wife likes to point out my gray hairs. I can't deny it anymore. It's so good to see so many people who are younger than me in the audience, because I think actually the answer is in youth and the future. And very often when I come to these meetings, I see young people protesting against carbon markets, saying it's evil, it's capitalism. Yesterday there was a big protest against people in suits. And so I very quickly took off my tie. I think that having young people understand the balance between pragmatism and idealism in a way that achieves solutions, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, this horrible phrase we have in English, then I think that is the way forward, because it's only through political pressure at mass scale. When people in the US are more concerned about what their presidential candidate thinks about cryptocurrency than climate change, we have a problem. We need to mobilize mass movements that are open and acceptable, rather than these kind of extremist fringe movements that just drive people away and are never going to achieve the tipping point we need to win elections and start really winning this fight for net zero.
I like it. Indeed, I think that the COPs are more and more for young people. We have to walk a lot. We're going to be hot and tired, and it's new generations are coming in, which is welcome. And as you said, I think it's the idealization is great, but also we have to know reality and what's good. And of course, as you mentioned, for developing countries, the possibility of attracting finance, closing that gap, implementing technologies that in global north, maybe they're the business as usual, but not for our countries that are these much needed new technologies like Chile, utilizing best energy storage with grid forming and any other type of technology that also those projects bring co-benefits. And we don't have to forget that. I think one evolution of the carbon market from the few years to now is like really looking at how the mitigation activities are impacting the benefits for the developing countries or those implementing the projects. How are those benefits are being measured talking about the MRV, the real impact on the ground, and not just the carbon market as a financial instrument, no, but one of many instruments that have many positives and outlooks, and that we don't have to forget that. I don't know if you would like to add. There's one more question. You're right. Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Hatice from the University of Vienna, and first of all, thank you so much for the great panel. So my question is gonna be from the legal perspective. As you all know, there's no proper legal definition of voluntary carbon credits, and that makes the markets very not reliable. So I was gonna ask what would be the most common legal dispute you may have seen in practice? Because myself as a lawyer, when the clients want to invest in these projects, they are kind of concerned what kind of legal safeguards the lawyer should suggest. So maybe that would be the second question. You think also I'm an academic, so you think we should work on a doctrine that maybe we can make a unified legal framework, or maybe we should come up with a better private international law rules?
Take the question. I can.
Well, thanks for the question, and it's an important issue. I'm not a lawyer, but we are signing contracts with donor governments, with jurisdictions, and with corporates and investors, intermediaries all over the world. One of the thorniest issues, in answer to your first question, is kind of connected to what you said at the end. Financial instruments, contracts for commodities, they often use New York law. I mean, I'm from New York, but I think because it's seen as enforceable, there's usually, not always, you can rely on that law to be enforceable by the courts, and it's fairly well understood broadly around the world. But, when you show up in a small African country and you're transacting with a minister of environment, they're like, well, we want to use our law, and we're the one that made it. So it's really complicated, and at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to bring buyers in using a local government law in a small country in Africa, but there needs to be an easier path. So the only way we know how to solve it is to, to find a pro bono lawyer to go in and advise them, or to get a nonprofit organization to provide support. But, if there could be, after Article 6.4 is landed and everybody uses it and agrees on all the elements, that the contracting around transactions that use Article 6 could also have some kind of a standardization around the world. I mean, that would be great. Yeah. And on the safeguards, I would say, at least in the case of, working in the forests, there's many, many types of safeguards. But the most important one, I think, from our perspective, is around, prior informed consent of the affected peoples living in those forests, which can be very difficult when you've got a massive region, like in the Brazilian state of Pará, where we are right now. I think I heard it's twice the size of Germany and France combined. I'm not sure if that's right, but it's big. And so how do you even find all these people? How do you know that if you've talked to 100 leaders of communities that you didn't miss another 300? It's a really hard problem, but it's really, really important. Because otherwise, you do all this good work, a bunch of money is delivered, and then after the fact, someone finds out about it and they say, wait, nobody talked to me. And then, that's not fair to that person, but it also is the kind of headline that can undermine all that good work and turn a project that did so many things right into a project that everybody wishes they'd never been a part of. So it's a really, really important piece of it.
Thanks, Eric. And I think you touched different points in terms of like the legal uncertainty, legal needs. We need lawyers that understand what they're helping their clients, because there's specifically in some global south countries, for example, that we still need to, more education on that. Obviously, it depends on which country, as you mentioned. Some countries have more legal jurisdictions are accepted, others, and this is part of the negotiation right now, but I think standardization will help. Obviously, building capacities, sharing experiences, because obviously this is new, so we will see in a couple of years more, probably more issues that arise that we couldn't envisage, we couldn't plan. I think I'm a lawyer myself, so I'm thinking of that the contracts, ERPAs to MOPAs, I think that they're depending on the information that is shared, it's between buyer and seller, and that information maybe is not currently available for all. And I would say that obviously the standardization for the letters of intent or letter of authorization, because buyers are expecting maybe some wording and some certainties in some of these letters when they're issued, and maybe sometimes it's not, because they're sovereign buyers and they wish to use their own language or the standards, and sometimes that there's a mixed match that we'll see that that could evolve into illegal litigations. Thank you. So we have to wrap up. I see that they're turning the lights off a little bit. Thank you all. I think that we've heard Article 6 is here. Now let's go to implement. Thank you for this very interesting and lively discussion, and for your time to share today with us all of your experience. And I think that we can close the session. Thank you.